Hello all. The topic we will be discussing in this lecture is operating system services. So basically operating system provides an environment for execution of programs and services. The services offered by operating system can be classified into two types. The first one is a list of services that are provided by operating system to help the user. So these are called as user services. The second one is the list of services provided by the operating system for efficient operation of the computer system. So these are the uh, broadly these are the two types of services provided by the operating system. Now let us try to understand what are the user related services provided by the operating system. So we will discuss the user related services provided by operating system under 6 headings. The first one is the first service is user interface. So user interface is basically it's a service provided by the operating system. So typically operating system supports three types of user interfaces. One is a command line interface, the other one is a graphical user interface, the other one is a batch interface. So what is a command line interface? So if you take a Linux, we have terminal. So just I have opened WSL. Similarly, if you see Windows, there you have command prompt. So these are nothing but command line interfaces. Here, to perform any task, we will give a command. According to that particular command, the task will be executed. So such interface is called as command line interface. That is, for every activity, there will be a command, and through that command, the task will be done. And the second type of interface is called as graphical user interface, where we have list of menus or icons. Icons were used to represent files and folders. By clicking on the menu and icon, the job will be done. So mainly here mouse will play a key role. Okay. So for example, now I am clicking on the start button of Windows, so it shows different menus. So whichever the file I want, I can open by clicking on that appropriate menu. Okay, so that type of interface is called as graphical user interface. So Linux and Mac also provides graphical user interface. The next is a batch interface. What is batch? Batch is nothing but a collection of commands. If you take a collection of Linux commands and keep it in a file, then that file will be called as a batch file. For example, in one of the lab programs, we have discussed shell script. Shell script is actually an example of batch file. Okay, so shell script, what it contains list of Linux commands. So when you execute a particular shell script, that particular file will sequentially execute all the command it contains. Okay, so such an option is called as batch interface. Okay. So shell script is an example for actually batch interface. Okay. So whatever the particular file contains, you have to it will basically the file will have list of commands, list of Linux commands or Unix command or a command pertaining to a particular operating system, and when you execute that file, all the commands will be executed in that order. Even Windows also supports batch. Okay, there is a command called copycon. So in DOS environment, you can create a batch file by using copycon command. Okay. So this is the first service that is provided by the operating system at user level. The second service is program execution. So the operating system should provide an environment for execution of user programs. So user programs may be any program which is developed using languages like C, C++, Java or .NET, or it may be any application that a user downloads and he want to execute it. So the operating system should provide an environment for that. So that service is called as program execution service. The third level of service is IO operations. So what is IO operations? So, so, so every computer will have IO devices and user should be able to access the IO device. They should be able to perform read or write operation from the IO devices. So again, operating system should enable the user to access the appropriate IO devices. So this service is called as IO operations related services. And the fourth service is file system manipulation. So normally the computer will have files and the user should be able to create new files. He should be able to delete existing files. He should be able to read or write content from the file, and also you should be able to modify the file content. So operating system should enable the user to perform such operations. So So this service provided by the operating system to make sure that users can perform file related operation is called as file system manipulation services. The next is communication. So what is communication? Here communication in the sense sometimes two or more users may want to communicate with each other. So that is, so this communication may happen through different ways. Communication may happen through different ways. Okay. For example, communication may happen in different ways. There are two modes of communication available. The user can the users can communicate with each other either by using a shared memory or by message passing. So first let us try to understand how the users can communicate by using shared memory. So let us assume there is a shared memory. So this is a shared memory and there are two users, user 1 and user 2. Say user 1 is running a particular process and that particular process is called as P1. So user 1 is executing a process called P1 and user 2, say user 2 is executing a process and that particular process is called as P2. Okay. So now using shared memory, how the user 1 and user 2 can communicate. So this is a shared memory which can be used by both user 1 and user 2. So if user 1 want to communicate to user 2, that is user 1 in the sense process 1, because user 1 is executing process 1. So if user 1 wants to communicate something to user 2, then he will write whatever he want to communicate in this shared memory. Okay. Now user 2 can read it from the shared memory and he can understand what user 1 would like to communicate with him. Again, if user 1 want to reply back something to user, again if user 2, again if user 2 want to reply back something to user 1, then he can also write that particular information in the shared memory. Now user 2 can read this particular content and he can understand what he want to communicate. So this type of communication is called as communication through shared memory. That is, both the user or process will write whatever they want to communicate in the shared memory and the other process can read the content from the shared memory and understand what the other user is trying to communicate. Okay, so this is the first style of communication. The second style of communication is by using message passing. In this case, Both the process can communicate with each other directly by passing messages. Okay, so they, if process 1 want to communicate with process 2, process 1 will send a message and that can be received by process 2. Okay, so this type of communication is called as message passing. So these are the two ways in which users can communicate. Now it is the job of the operating system to provide such services so that users can communicate among themselves. The next type of service provided by the operating system is error detection. So if any computer hardware fails, or if it is malfunctioning, then that should be immediately detected by the operating system and appropriate action should be taken. Okay, so error may occur either in processor or in memory or in any IO devices. Then operating system should constantly check whether there is any error. So if there is error, it should detect and it should take the appropriate action. So this particular service is called as error detection service. So these are the services provided by the operating system for user. The second type of service provided by the operating system is for the efficient operation of the system. So under this category, we will be discussing three types of services. The first one is resource allocation. So it is the job of the operating system to ensure that resources are allocated in an efficient way. All the resources were under the control of operating system. So what are the resources? Primarily the resources are CPU cycle, memory and IO devices. These are the core resources of a computer system. CPU cycle in the sense CPU time. That is when CPU should be allocated for whom. So that decision should be taken by the operating system. Okay, so that resource is called as CPU time or CPU cycle. Okay, and the second type of resource which is under the control of operating system is memory. That is main memory. Main memory is with operating system. So operating system should decide like what process should reside in the main memory and how long, all those things. The third type of resource which is under the control of operating system is all the IO devices, okay, which includes hard disk or any other devices like printer, scanner, mouse, keyboard. All these are under the control of operating system. So operating system should ensure the efficient usage of all these uh, resources or efficient allocation of all these resources. Okay, so that is what is called as resource allocation. And the second type of service provided by operating system is accounting. It is at any point of time operating system should be knowing who is using which resources and how long they will be using. Currently who is using the processor, currently who is using which part of memory, and how long that user will be using that part of memory. All these information the operating system should keep account. The next is protection and security. So what is protection and what is security? We are using two terms. One is protection and the other one is security. So protection in the sense, so, so protection basically uh, ensures that the the access to the resources are controlled in a given environment. So within your particular system, the resource access should be controlled. It is not that everybody can access any resource. No. So if a user is allocated with a set of resources, he should be allowed to access only those resources. He should not be allowed to access any other resource. So this concept is called as protection. So operating system ensures that every user will be able to access only those resources that are allocated to them. They cannot access any other extra resource. For example, assume currently there are three processes in the main memory. Process 1, process 2 and process 3. Say process 1 is using the location from 1 to 10, memory location I mean, and process 2 is using memory location from 11 to 20, and process 3 is using memory location from 21 to say 40. Now it means that process 1 should be allowed to access only the memory location 1 to 20. It should not be given access to 11th location. If it tries to access 11th location, then operating system should identify it as a malfunction and it should immediately stop that activity. Similarly, process 2 should be able to access only the memory locations from 11 to 20 and not any other location. Similarly, process 3 should be given access only to 21 to 40, not anything else. So this operating system should ensure this. So this concept is called as protection. This is applicable for resources also. Say process 1 is allocated with resource 1 and resource 2. Then process 1 should be able to access only resource 1 and 2, not any other resource. Process 2 is allocated with say resource 4 and 6. Then process 2 should be able to access only resource 4 and 6. If process 2 tries to access resource 1, then that should be treated as an illegal action. Okay. Similarly, process 3 should be able to, if process 3 is allocated with some resource, say resource 7, then it should be able to access only that particular resource, not any other resource. So this type of controlled access to the resources is called as protection. So if you see, all these processes belong to the same system, but still they have certain constraints. It's not that they can access anything, no. So whatever they are allotted with, only they can access that. So that controlling, sorry, that controlled access to the system resources is called as protection. The next concept is called as security. So what is security? How security differs from protection? So protection is with respect to the user who belongs to a particular system. Okay. So protection is in terms of the user who belongs to a particular system. So all these process 1, process 2, process 3, they all belong to the same computer system. So here we use the term protection. Okay, so here we use the term protection. That is, they should be able to access only those resources which are allocated to them. Whereas security is something with respect to an outside user. Say an outside user, say a user from outside, say we call it as some user X. User X from outside, he wanted to access some resource in this particular computer. So say this is one particular computer. Then he should not be allowed to access directly. First, he should go into authentication process. You should verify whether he is an authenticated user or not. If he is the authenticated user, then you can allow him to access. Then also you cannot give him access to all the resource. Then you can define like what resource he can access and how long you can access. Okay. So giving access to an outsider through some authentication process, that is called as security. Okay. So how do we define protection? Protection ensures that access to the resources is controlled, okay, by the users of that particular system. Whereas security corresponds to the outsiders. When any outside user want to access the system, he should go through the process of authentication. So operating system should provide this particular service also, protection and security. So this is the diagram which describes whatever we have discussed so far. So this is a generic computer system, how a computer system looks like. At the bottom layer we have the hardware, and then we have operating system, and then the list of services. So all the services that we have discussed were here. So you can see this resource allocation, accounting, protection and security. These are the services corresponding to, these are the services which are used to ensure the efficient operation of the system. Whereas all the other services are user related services. Okay. So this user interface, so we have discussed about user interfaces. So user interfaces can be of either command line interface or graphical user interface, or what you call batch. So this command line interface, it can be of it may be of multiple flavors. For example, in Linux, if you take, shells are available in multiple flavors, like you have Bourne shell, you have C shell, like that. So basically it fetches the command from the user and it executes it. And this command line interface can be implemented in two ways. The first method is, this is a particular shell. Okay, this shell itself will execute the command. When you give a command ls, shell itself will execute. That is one style. And in another style, the shell will not execute, it will just call an appropriate program. So when you type ls, there will be a program ls that will be called and it will execute. So here the job of the shell is not to execute anything, it just calls that particular program. When you give pwd, the program pwd will be called. When you give who am I, the program who am I will be called. So what I mean in the sense, the command line interfaces were implemented in two ways. The first way, this particular terminal window itself will execute. Okay. In the second case, this window will not execute anything. This will just call that other program. If that program is valid, it will execute. So the second style of implementing, that is calling program by names, that is much effective style. Okay, because if you want to add any new features, then you need not modify the shell. You can just add a new program without tampering the shell. Okay, so this is a typical output from a command line interface from a Linux based system. Okay, see, different commands were given like ls, pwd, all these things. And then graphical user interface. So graphical user interface includes, which primarily it uses mouse, keyboard, and monitor, and it uses icons to represent files, programs, etc. So nowadays, almost every system comes with a command line interface and a graphical user interface. CLI stands for command line interface. So if you see Windows, it supports both graphical user interface and command line interface. So Windows supports command line interface through command prompt or command shell. And Apple Mac operating system also supports both graphical user interface and command line interface. So Linux and Unix also supports both CLI and GUI interfaces. Apart from this, nowadays we may also have systems with touch screen, in which you need not use mouse. You can use your fingers to activate or to execute programs, and you can also use actions and gestures. Okay, and you can use virtual keyboard for entry of any textual information, and it may also operate based on your voice. So voice commands also may be given for these devices. So this is a typical GUI screen from Mac operating system. Okay, so that's it. We'll stop here. So what we have discussed, in the sense, we have discussed different types of services provided by the operating system. We have discussed this under two headings: the user related services and the services to ensure efficient operation of a system. Okay, thank you.